My daughter handed me an envelope and said it was a gift. Inside was her $1.2 million debt. I'm David Miller, and I thought I knew my own child. When Jessica said, "Close your eyes, I have a surprise," I expected maybe a birthday card. Instead, she handed me legal documents, transferring her $1.2 million debt directly to me. She smiled like she'd just given me a present. The papers were real, notarized, filed, legally binding. My name was now attached to pharmaceutical fraud charges I'd never heard of. But what she didn't know was that I'd been quietly building a tech empire for 30 years, while she watched me push a janitor's cart through Silicon Valley. And she was about to find out exactly who she was stealing from. I looked at those papers, folded them carefully, and said just 4 words. We need to talk. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story starts with a lie that lasted 3 decades. Let me explain how I became invisible to my own daughter. After my wife died in 2020, I took a job as night janitor at Tech Hub Innovations in Palo Alto. Jessica was building her pharmaceutical sales career, and I wanted to stay close to her world. She lived in a $4,800 a month apartment, 2 miles from the building where I worked. The humiliation started small. At Jessica's housewarming party, she introduced me to her tech friends as my dad who cleans offices. Not my father, not David, just the guy who cleans offices. I watched her friends' faces change, polite smiles, quick handshakes. Then they'd drift away to talk about their startups and venture capital rounds. Jessica never corrected them, never mentioned I'd put her through Stanford or paid for her MBA or that I'd been supporting her networking events with $2,000 monthly transfers. The pattern escalated. At tech conferences Jessica attended, she'd pretend not to see me emptying trash cans. Once, I overheard her telling a pharmaceutical executive, "My father's just simple blue-collar, doesn't understand business." I kept my mouth shut. I had my reasons. But what really cut deep was watching her dismiss everything I'd taught her. Jessica would brag about discovering business strategies I'd explained to her years earlier. She'd quote articles from Harvard Business Review like they were her original insights. Meanwhile, I'd push my Rubbermaid cart past her networking groups, listening to 25-year-olds explain tech disruption like they'd invented it. The irony was thick. Every night, I cleaned the offices of companies whose business models I'd helped develop. I'd empty trash cans in conference rooms where CEOs discussed strategies I'd suggested to them privately. These same CEOs would nod respectfully when they saw me in the hallways. They knew. Jessica didn't. Her pharmaceutical career was booming, or so she claimed. Designer handbags were $3,000 each. A BMW i8 that cost $163,000. Always the most expensive restaurants for our monthly dinners. She'd pay with corporate credit cards, making jokes about pharmaceutical company perks. I should have asked more questions. Last Christmas, Jessica brought her new business partner to family dinner. Some guy named Trevor who kept checking his Rolex and talking about disrupting healthcare distribution. Jessica hung on his every word. "My dad wouldn't understand," she said when Trevor started explaining their business model. "He's more of a hands-on worker." Trevor glanced at me with that look I'd seen 1,000 times, pity mixed with dismissal, like I was furniture. "What kind of work do you do, Mr. Miller?" he asked. Before I could answer, Jessica cut in, "Building maintenance. Very different world from pharmaceutical sales." I nodded quietly. Different world indeed. But here's what Jessica never understood. I'd been watching her world very carefully. Every night, for 4 years, I'd walked those halls, cleaned those offices, and listened to conversations she'd never hear. I knew which startups were getting funded and which were failing. I knew which pharmaceutical companies were under FBI investigation and which executives were taking kickbacks. I especially knew about Trevor's company. The warning signs were everywhere, but Jessica was too busy feeling superior to notice. She never asked why I could afford to help with her expenses on a janitor's salary. Never wondered why building security guards called me Mr. Miller instead of David. Never questioned why I had business cards for lawyers she couldn't afford. Most importantly, she never asked what I did before I started cleaning offices. That was about to become a very expensive oversight. The first sign of real trouble came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was having coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was official, professional, the kind that means serious problems. Mr. David Miller? This is Agent Katherine Johnson with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to discuss some documents filed in your name. My blood went cold. Not because I was guilty of anything, but because I immediately knew what this was about. Jessica's pharmaceutical business wasn't as legitimate as she'd claimed. What kind of documents? I asked, though I was already reaching for my laptop. Debt transfer agreements totaling $1.2 million. Pharmaceutical fraud case. Your signature appears on several guarantee forms. I pulled up my email while Agent Johnson talked. Sure enough, there were notifications from 3 different law firms. Collection notices. Fraud investigation updates. All addressed to me. All related to pharmaceutical kickback schemes I'd never heard of. But I had heard of them, just not connected to Jessica. For months, I'd been cleaning offices where federal investigators discussed pharmaceutical fraud cases. Trevor's company, MedFlow Solutions, was mentioned frequently. Illegal kickbacks to doctors, inflated drug prices, insurance fraud. The FBI had been building a case since last summer. Jessica had signed my name to everything. Agent Johnson, I said carefully, I think my daughter may have used my identity without my knowledge. That's what we need to determine, Mr. Miller. Can you come in Thursday at 2 p.m.? I agreed, but my mind was already racing. If Jessica had really transferred her business debts to me, this wasn't just about money. This was about federal criminal charges, prison time, asset forfeiture. I spent the next hour reviewing the documents. The paperwork was sophisticated, too sophisticated for Jessica to have created alone. Someone had coached her through this process. Someone who knew exactly how to structure debt transfers to avoid immediate detection. Trevor. The amounts were staggering, $347,000 in fraudulent pharmaceutical contracts, $298,000 in illegal kickback payments, $555,000 in regulatory fines and penalties. Jessica had essentially made me the fall guy for an entire criminal enterprise. But here's what made my blood boil. The dates. These documents were signed last month, February 2024, right around my 63rd birthday, while Jessica was planning my surprise party and talking about how grateful she was for everything I'd done for her. She'd been stealing from me while hugging me. I called my attorney, not the legal aid lawyer Jessica thought I could afford, but Michael Brown, senior partner at Brown and Associates. The same Michael Brown who happened to be CEO of one of my portfolio companies. David, he said when I explained the situation, this is identity theft. Criminal fraud. You're the victim here. I know that, but can she actually make this stick? Legally? She's betting you won't fight back, that you don't have the resources or knowledge to challenge this in court. It's a classic elder abuse strategy. Elder abuse? My own daughter was treating me like a helpless old man she could manipulate. What are my options? Honestly, if you were really just a janitor with no assets, this would be devastating. The legal fees alone would bankrupt most people. But you're not most people. I wasn't. Michael, I need you to do something for me. I want you to document everything, every company, every partnership, every asset. Full disclosure, it's time. Are you sure? Once we reveal your actual net worth, there's no going back to being invisible. I looked around my modest apartment, the same apartment I'd chosen specifically because it maintained my cover. Single bedroom, basic furniture, 15-year-old Toyota Camry in the parking lot. Everything designed to support the fiction that I was just a simple janitor. She forced my hand. I said, I never wanted it to come to this, but Jessica needs to learn that actions have consequences. What about your relationship with her? That was the question that kept me awake that night. Was I really willing to destroy my relationship with my only child to prove a point? Was justice worth losing my daughter forever? Then I remembered her face when she handed me those documents. The smug satisfaction, the assumption that I was too stupid and powerless to fight back. She hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen my dignity, and that's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was done being underestimated, done being invisible, done letting my own daughter treat me like I was worthless. Jessica wanted to play games with debt transfers and criminal fraud. Fine. But she was about to learn that she'd picked the wrong target. I called Jessica the next morning. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. We need to talk about these documents you gave me. Oh, that? Her tone was casual, like we were discussing weekend plans. Yeah, that's just some business stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Nothing to worry about? Jessica, you transferred $1.2 million in debt to my name. Dad, you're being dramatic. It's just paperwork. Trevor explained everything. Since you're family, it helps with our credit rating. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. Do you understand what you've done? I helped our family business prospects. You should be thanking me. The FBI called me yesterday. That got her attention. The line went quiet for about 10 seconds. What do you mean, the FBI? Pharmaceutical fraud investigation. Your business partner, Trevor, is under federal indictment, and my name is on every document. That's impossible. Trevor said the investigation was about a different company. Trevor lied to you, and now you've made me an accessory to felony fraud. Jessica's voice shifted, no longer casual. Now she was annoyed. Dad, you're overreacting. You don't understand business law. This happens all the time. Debt transfer fraud happens all the time. It's not fraud, it's strategic financial planning. The arrogance in her voice was breathtaking. She genuinely believed she could steal from me and then explain it away with corporate buzzwords. Jessica, I want you to reverse these transfers. Today? I can't do that. The deals are already in motion. Besides, it's not like you have any assets they can actually seize. There it was, the assumption that had made this whole scheme possible. Jessica believed I was poor, powerless, too simple to understand what she'd done to me. What if I do have assets? She laughed, actually laughed. Dad, I've seen your bank statements when you asked me to help with your online banking. You have like $8,000 in checking and maybe $40,000 in retirement savings. The FBI isn't going to waste time chasing down a janitor's piggy bank. What if you're wrong about my finances? I'm not wrong. Look, I know this seems scary, but Trevor has lawyers handling everything. You just need to stay quiet and let the professionals work. Stay quiet. That phrase echoed in my head. What if I don't want to stay quiet? Her tone turned sharp. Dad, you're not qualified to make these decisions. You clean office buildings. I work in pharmaceutical sales. I understand complex business transactions. You don't. And if I called a lawyer anyway? With what money? Legal fees for federal fraud cases start at $50,000. You'd have to sell everything you own and still couldn't afford decent representation. The contempt in her voice was crystal clear. She'd calculated this perfectly. Steal from the poor old man who loves her too much to fight back and lacks the resources to hire competent legal help. Jessica, I'm asking you one more time. Reverse these transfers. No. And Dad, I need you to promise me you won't do anything stupid. Don't talk to any more FBI agents without calling me first. Don't hire some bargain basement lawyer who'll just make things worse. Let Trevor's people handle this. What if I don't promise that? Then you'll end up in federal prison, and I'll have to explain to everyone that my father was too stubborn and proud to accept help from people who actually understand business. I felt something shift inside me. A line had been crossed. Jessica wasn't just stealing from me, she was threatening me. She was using my love for her as a weapon to ensure my silence. You know what, Jessica? You're right about one thing. What's that? This is about understanding business, and you're about to get a very expensive education. What do you mean? I kept my voice level, professional. I mean, I'm going to call some people. What people? Dad, you don't know anyone who can help with this. We'll see. Don't be ridiculous. Who are you going to call? The building manager? Other janitors? Your retirement fund advisor? Something like that? Jessica's laugh was genuinely cruel now. Dad, I love you, but you need to face reality. You're 63 years old. You empty trash cans for a living. You drive a 15-year-old Toyota. You live in a one-bedroom apartment. The most important person in your contact list is probably your doctor. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was almost gentle, like she was explaining something to a child. I'm trying to protect you here. Trevor's lawyers are experts at this. They've handled dozens of cases like this. If you try to fight this on your own, you'll lose everything and still end up liable for the debt. And if I don't fight it, then everything stays quiet. The investigation focuses on the real targets. You sign a few papers, maybe pay a small fine, and life goes back to normal. Normal? Normal? You keep your job, keep your apartment, keep your routine. I keep building my career. Everyone wins, except I'd be a criminal, and she'd have gotten away with identity theft. I need to think about this, I said. Don't think too long, Dad. Time matters in these situations. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen for 20 minutes, staring at my coffee cup. Jessica had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd revealed exactly what she thought of me. Poor, stupid, powerless, too loving to fight back and too broke to hire help. She was wrong on every count, but I wasn't going to tell her that over the phone. I was going to show her in person, in front of everyone she'd ever tried to impress. The next few days were about making phone calls Jessica couldn't imagine I was capable of making. My first call was to Katherine Johnson, the FBI agent. Agent Johnson, this is David Miller. We spoke about the pharmaceutical fraud case. I'm ready to come in, but I need to bring my attorney. Of course. What's your lawyer's name? Michael Brown from Brown and Associates. There was a pause. The Michael Brown? The one who represents Fortune 500 companies? That's right. Mr. Miller, I have to ask, how does a building maintenance worker afford representation from one of the most expensive law firms in Silicon Valley? It's complicated. I'll explain everything when we meet. The second call was to Sarah Davis, the tech journalist who'd been investigating pharmaceutical fraud cases. She'd written 17 articles about kickback schemes in the past year. I'd read every one. Ms. Davis, my name is David Miller. I have information about the MedFlow Solutions case. Are you a whistleblower? I'm a victim. My daughter transferred $1.2 million in fraud debt to my name. Jesus, are you willing to go on record? Potentially, but I need to ask you something first. How much do you know about Tech Hub Innovations? The incubator in Palo Alto? They've funded about 60 companies in the past decade. Very successful portfolio. Why? I work there. Are you an executive? A board member? I'm the janitor. Sarah laughed, not unkindly. Okay, that's not what I expected. How does a janitor have information about pharmaceutical fraud? You'd be surprised what people say when they think you're invisible. That was true, but not the whole truth. I'd let her discover the rest during our interview. The third call was to my investment advisor, the one Jessica didn't know existed. Robert, it's David. I need you to prepare a full portfolio summary. Every company, every partnership agreement, every asset, print format. David, that's going to be a very thick document. Your holdings span 30 years. Are you sure you want everything? Everything. And Robert, Make sure the founding documents for Tech Hub are included, the original 1994 paperwork. The ones showing you as majority stakeholder? Those exactly. My fourth call was the most important one. I dialed the main number for Tech Hub Innovations and asked for building management. This is David Miller. I need to schedule a meeting with building security for Friday afternoon. Mr. Miller, of course. Should we prepare the conference room on the 14th floor? That won't be necessary. I'll be working my regular shift, but I need security to be aware that I might have visitors. Understood, sir. Anything else? Yes. I need you to contact all the startup CEOs in the building. Tell them there's going to be a special presentation Friday evening, rooftop terrace. Attendance is strongly encouraged. May I ask what kind of presentation? Let's call it a business education seminar. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I took the elevator to the 14th floor instead of using the service stairs. The executive floor was quieter than the startup levels below. Mahogany doors, brass nameplate, carpet that cost more per square foot than most people's rent. At the end of the hallway was a corner office with a view of the entire valley. My office. I hadn't used it since 2020, but building management kept it exactly as I'd left it. Clean desk, empty bookshelves, a single photo of my wife on the windowsill. I sat in the chair, Italian leather, $3,400, and looked out at the building I'd helped design. 30 years ago, when the internet was still new and Silicon Valley was just becoming a household name, I'd partnered with 2 Stanford engineers to create a different kind of business incubator. Not just funding, but mentorship. Not just space, but community. We'd started with 3 companies and a $2 million investment. Today, Tech Hub had launched 68 successful startups. Our portfolio companies had a combined market value of $847 million. My personal stake was worth approximately $120 million. But I'd never wanted Jessica to know that. After her mother died, I'd made a conscious choice to live simply. I wanted to understand my daughter without the complication of wealth. I wanted to know if she could love me for who I was, not what I owned. The experiment had lasted 4 years. The results were not encouraging. Jessica saw me as poor, stupid, and useful only for small favors. She'd stolen from me because she believed I was powerless to stop her. She'd threatened me because she thought I had no options. Tomorrow night, at her fundraising party, she was going to discover how wrong she'd been. My phone buzzed. A text message from Jessica. Dad, I talked to Trevor. He can get you a plea deal. Minimal fine, no jail time. All you have to do is stay quiet. This is a good offer. I typed back, I'll give you my answer tomorrow night. What's tomorrow night? You'll see. As I walked back to the service elevator, I passed 3 startup CEOs in the hallway. They nodded respectfully. Good evening, Mr. Miller. Evening, David. See you at the presentation tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it, I replied. Jessica had no idea that her biggest fundraising event was about to become the most educational night of her life. Friday evening, the rooftop terrace at Tech Hub Innovations was packed with exactly the crowd Jessica had been trying to impress for years. 200 tech professionals, venture capitalists with $500 million funds, startup CEOs who'd built companies from nothing, angel investors who could write 7-figure checks without blinking. This was Jessica's big night, her chance to pitch MedFlow solutions to the people who mattered. I arrived at 7 p.m., wearing my janitor uniform and pushing my Rubbermaid cart. The party was already in full swing. Open bar, catered food from Palo Alto's most expensive restaurant, a live jazz quartet playing softly in the background. Jessica had spent at least $50,000 on this event. Money she didn't have, of course, but that was about to become someone else's problem. I parked my cart near the service entrance and started emptying trash cans, just like any other night. Most people ignored me completely. A few nodded politely. Business as usual. Jessica was holding court near the center of the terrace, surrounded by potential investors. She wore a $4,000 dress and jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. Trevor was beside her, working the crowd with practiced charm. I positioned myself close enough to hear their pitch. MedFlow Solutions is revolutionizing pharmaceutical distribution, Jessica was saying. We've created proprietary algorithms that optimize drug delivery while reducing costs for healthcare providers. It sounded impressive if you didn't know that proprietary algorithms meant kickback schemes and cost reduction meant insurance fraud. A woman in an expensive suit raised her hand. What about regulatory compliance? The pharmaceutical industry is heavily regulated. Trevor jumped in smoothly. We have extensive legal expertise managing regulatory relationships. Our compliance record is spotless. I almost laughed. Trevor's compliance record included 3 ongoing federal investigations. What kind of funding are you seeking? Asked a man I recognized as the CEO of a successful biotech startup. We're looking for $15 million in Series A funding, Jessica replied. We already have $8 million in committed capital, so we're more than halfway to our goal. Another lie. The committed capital was stolen money and fraudulent debt transfers. As the pitch continued, I noticed something Jessica hadn't planned for. Several people in the crowd were checking their phones and whispering to each other. Sarah Davis, the journalist I'd spoken with, was discreetly taking notes from the back of the group. But Jessica was too focused on her presentation to notice the mood shifting. The pharmaceutical industry is ripe for disruption, she was saying. Traditional distribution models are antiquated. Our platform can reduce costs by up to 40% while maintaining quality standards. How do you achieve those cost reductions? Asked a venture capitalist. Through strategic partnerships with healthcare providers, Trevor answered. We've developed innovative incentive structures that align everyone's interests. Incentive structures was a creative way to describe bribery. That's when Jessica noticed me. I was emptying a trash can about 10 feet away, and our eyes met. She looked annoyed. Excuse me for just a moment, she said to the crowd, then walked over to me. Dad, what are you doing here? This is a private event. I work here, I said quietly. I'm just doing my job. Well, can you do it somewhere else? This is important. I'll be finished in a few minutes. Jessica's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Dad, this is embarrassing. These are serious business people. Having a janitor wandering around makes it look unprofessional. Sorry, I said. I didn't realize I was making you look bad. It's not personal. It's just, this is a big night for me. I need everything to be perfect. I nodded and moved my cart closer to the edge of the terrace, but I didn't leave, and I made sure my conversation with Jessica was loud enough for the closest investors to overhear. Jessica returned to her pitch, but I could see she was rattled. A few people in the crowd were now looking at me with curiosity rather than indifference. As I was saying, Jessica continued, MedFlow Solutions represents a unique opportunity to invest in the future of healthcare distribution. What's your background in pharmaceutical sales? Asked a woman I didn't recognize. Jessica launched into her resume. 5 years at 3 different companies, awards for sales performance, expertise in regulatory compliance and market analysis. It was all true, but incomplete. She left out the part where she'd been fired from her last job for questionable billing practices. What about your partner? The same woman gestured toward Trevor. Trevor has 15 years of experience in healthcare distribution and regulatory affairs, Jessica replied. Also true, but incomplete. Trevor had 15 years of experience getting pharmaceutical companies in trouble with federal regulators. The Q&A continued for another 20 minutes. Jessica and Trevor fielded questions about market size, competitive analysis, revenue projections, and scaling strategies. They were polished, professional, and completely convincing, if you didn't know they were criminals. Finally, Trevor stepped forward to wrap up the presentation. We're excited about the opportunity to partner with investors who share our vision for transforming healthcare distribution. We'll be accepting commitments through the end of next week. The crowd began to disperse, breaking into smaller groups for networking and follow-up conversations. Jessica was immediately surrounded by potential investors, asking detailed questions about investment terms and due diligence requirements. I watched her face light up as she collected business cards and scheduled follow-up meetings. This was everything she'd worked for: the validation, the respect, the recognition as a serious entrepreneur. It was also the last moment of her old life. I checked my watch. 8:47 p.m. Perfect timing. I walked to the center of the terrace and cleared my throat loudly. "Excuse me, everyone. Could I have your attention for just a moment?" Conversation stopped. 200 heads turned toward me. Jessica looked confused, then mortified. "Dad, what are you doing?" I ignored her and addressed the crowd. "I apologize for interrupting, but there's something you all need to know about tonight's presentation." Trevor stepped forward. "Sir, this is a private event. You need to." "I am David Miller," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the terrace, "and I believe some of you might know me." That's when everything changed. The murmur started immediately. People checking their phones, whispering to colleagues, looking at me with sudden recognition. David Miller? The biotech CEO I'd recognized earlier stepped forward. "David Miller from Tech Hub Innovations?" "That's right." Jessica's face went white. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I reached into my janitor cart and pulled out a manila folder. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to share some information about tonight's investment opportunity." "Sir," Trevor interrupted, "you're disrupting a private business presentation. I'm going to have to ask you to—" "Actually, Trevor, you're disrupting my building." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is the founding charter for Tech Hub Innovations, dated March 15th, 1994. As you can see, I'm listed as the primary founding partner with a 60% ownership stake. The crowd pressed closer. Someone started taking pictures with their phone. Jessica grabbed my arm. "Dad, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I pulled out the second document. This is my current portfolio summary, prepared by Robert Wilson at Meridian Financial. It shows my partnership stakes in 68 companies, including 12 that are represented in this crowd tonight. A woman near the front gasped, "David Miller? Oh my God, you're the silent partner who funded our Series A round." "And our Series B," added another CEO. "And our exit strategy consulting," said a third. I looked directly at Jessica. Her mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. "Now," I continued, addressing the crowd, "I want you to understand why I've revealed this information tonight. My daughter Jessica has been raising money for a pharmaceutical company called MedFlow Solutions. What she hasn't told you is that MedFlow is currently under federal investigation for insurance fraud, kickback schemes, and regulatory violations." Trevor started to object, but I held up my hand. More importantly, Jessica has recently transferred $1.2 million in criminal debt to my name without my knowledge or consent. She did this because she believed I was just a poor janitor who couldn't fight back. The crowd was completely silent now. Sarah Davis was recording everything on her phone. "Dad," Jessica whispered, "please stop." Agent Katherine Johnson from the FBI Financial Crimes Division will be here in approximately 15 minutes to arrest Trevor Mitchell and potentially Jessica Miller for federal fraud charges. That got everyone's attention. Several people started backing away from Trevor and Jessica. "This is insane," Trevor shouted. "This man is clearly having some kind of breakdown. None of this is real." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Catherine?" "Yes, it's David. They're both here. Rooftop terrace. Yes, I have the documents." I hung up and looked at Trevor. "Agent Johnson says to tell you that your passport has been flagged and your bank accounts are frozen pending investigation." Trevor's face went gray, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out the third document from my folder. This is a comprehensive report prepared by investigative journalist Sarah Davis. She's here tonight, documenting MedFlow Solutions' criminal activities over the past 18 months. The report includes bank records, recorded phone calls, and testimony from 3 pharmaceutical executives who've agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors. I held up the papers so everyone could see them. Trevor's company has been stealing from Medicare, bribing doctors, and inflating drug prices. The total fraud amount is approximately $47 million. You can't prove any of this, Trevor said, but his voice was shaking. Actually, I can. You see, Trevor, you made the same mistake my daughter made. You thought I was just a janitor who emptied your trash cans and couldn't possibly understand your business conversations. I pulled out my phone again and opened a recording app. But I've been recording everything for 6 months. Every meeting, every phone call, every bragging session about how easy it was to steal from stupid government healthcare programs. I pressed play. Trevor's voice filled the air, clear as day. The beauty of this system is that Medicare auditors are too slow to catch us. By the time they figure out what we're doing, we'll have moved the money offshore. The crowd was backing away now. People were leaving. Investors were literally running for the elevators. Jessica grabbed my arm harder. Dad, you're destroying my life. No, Jessica. You destroyed your own life when you decided to steal from me. But I'm your daughter. Yes, and I loved you enough to let you think I was poor so you could love me for who I am instead of what I own. But you didn't love me at all, did you? You were embarrassed by me. You mocked me. You stole from me. Tears were streaming down her face now. I didn't know. I thought you were just a janitor? Just a simple old man. Just someone you could use and discard. I pulled out the final document. This is a federal arrest warrant for Trevor Mitchell, and this is a civil lawsuit I'm filing against you for identity theft, elder abuse, and fraud. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I didn't understand. You understood perfectly. You understood that you thought I was powerless and stupid. You just didn't understand how wrong you were. That's when we heard the elevator doors opening. Agent Johnson stepped onto the terrace with 4 other federal agents. Trevor Mitchell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. As they handcuffed Trevor, he looked at me with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. I've stopped a criminal who was using my daughter to commit federal crimes. Agent Johnson walked over to Jessica. Ms. Miller, we need to talk. You have the right to remain silent. I watched them lead my daughter away in handcuffs. The terrace was almost empty now, just a few journalists, some building security, and me. Sarah Davis approached with her recorder. Mr. Miller, can you tell me how long you've been investigating this case? Since the moment my daughter handed me those debt transfer documents, she thought she was giving me a problem I couldn't solve. Actually, she was giving me all the evidence I needed to destroy her criminal enterprise. What happens now? I looked around the empty terrace. Abandoned drinks, scattered business cards, the ruins of Jessica's big night. Now my daughter learns that actions have consequences, and hopefully she learns that respect isn't something you inherit, it's something you earn. The last thing I did before the police finished their work was call building management. This is David Miller. Please prepare my office for Monday morning. I think it's time to stop being invisible. The legal machinery moved faster than I expected. By Monday morning, Trevor was in federal custody with no possibility of bail. MedFlow Solutions had its assets frozen and its pharmaceutical licenses suspended. The FBI had seized computers, bank records, and enough evidence to support charges against 17 different people. Jessica was released on her own recognizance, but only after posting a $250,000 bond that I refused to pay. She had to call her friend's family for help. The humiliation was probably worse than jail. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Monday with reporters wanting interviews. Sarah Davis had published her article Sunday night, and by morning it was trending on every major news platform. Tech janitor exposes $47 million. Pharmaceutical fraud scheme, with help from his own daughter. The story had everything journalists loved: corporate corruption, family betrayal, hidden wealth, and justice served with surgical precision. But the most immediate consequence was professional. By Tuesday afternoon, 3 pharmaceutical companies had terminated contracts with MedFlow Solutions. By Wednesday, 5 doctors who'd been taking kickbacks had been suspended by their hospitals. By Thursday, Medicare had launched a comprehensive audit of pharmaceutical distribution practices across 6 states. Jessica's career in pharmaceutical sales was effectively over. No legitimate company would hire someone under federal investigation for fraud. Her professional network, built over 5 years of networking events and industry conferences, disappeared overnight. The financial consequences were equally swift. Jessica's BMW was repossessed on Tuesday. The car payments had been coming from MedFlow's corporate account, which was now frozen. Her $4,800 a month apartment was next. She had 30 days to find new housing with no income and no references. Her designer wardrobe, expensive jewelry, and tech gadgets would have to be sold to pay legal fees. Criminal defense attorneys specializing in federal fraud cases charge $800 an hour, and Jessica's case would require months of preparation. But the social consequences were perhaps the most devastating. Silicon Valley is a small community. Everyone knows everyone. Jessica's public arrest at her own fundraising event became tech industry legend within 48 hours. Videos of her being handcuffed were shared on LinkedIn, Twitter, and industry discussion forums. She'd become a cautionary tale about pharmaceutical fraud and the dangers of underestimating people. Meanwhile, my own professional situation changed dramatically. After 30 years of operating as a silent partner, I was suddenly very visible in Silicon Valley circles. The Wall Street Journal wanted an interview about secret tech investing. Forbes was preparing a profile about the janitor who built a tech empire. TechCrunch wanted to know which startups I was backing next. I declined most interview requests, but I did agree to meet with Agent Johnson for a comprehensive debriefing about pharmaceutical fraud in the tech industry. "Mr. Miller," she said during our meeting Tuesday afternoon, "you've handed us the most complete pharmaceutical fraud case I've seen in 15 years. The recordings alone are enough to convict Trevor and probably a dozen co-conspirators." "What about Jessica?" "That depends on her cooperation. If she provides testimony about Trevor's operation and agrees to a plea deal, she might avoid prison time if she fights the charges." Agent Johnson shrugged. "She's looking at 5 to 10 years federal prison." I felt no satisfaction hearing that. Jessica was still my daughter, despite everything. "Agent Johnson, I need to ask you something. If Jessica cooperates fully, if she tells you everything about Trevor's operation, what kind of deal are we talking about?" "Probation, restitution, and permanent exclusion from the pharmaceutical industry. No prison time if her testimony helps us convict the bigger fish." "And if I spoke to the prosecutor on her behalf?" "Your testimony would carry significant weight. You're the victim here, and you have credibility with federal law enforcement." That afternoon, I made a phone call I'd been avoiding. "Jessica, it's Dad." Silence for nearly 30 seconds. "I can't believe you did this to me," she finally said. "I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself, but I might be able to help minimize the consequences." "How?" "Agent Johnson says if you cooperate fully and testify against Trevor, you can avoid prison time, probation, restitution, and you're banned from pharmaceutical sales forever. But no federal prison." "And you'd support that deal?" "If you tell the complete truth about everything. No lies, no omissions, no protecting Trevor or anyone else involved." "Why would you help me? after what I did. I looked out my office window at the building I'd helped create, thinking about the daughter I'd raised and the stranger she'd become. Because you're still my daughter. And because sometimes people need a second chance to become who they're supposed to be. Dad, I'm sorry. I really didn't know. We'll talk about apologies later. Right now, we need to focus on keeping you out of federal prison. For the first time in our conversation, Jessica's voice sounded like the child I remembered. Will you come with me to meet the prosecutor? Yes, I said. But Jessica? This is the last time I clean up your mess. 6 months later, the full scope of the consequences had become clear. Trevor received 8 years in federal prison. The judge called it one of the most sophisticated pharmaceutical fraud schemes she'd ever seen. He was also ordered to pay $12 million in restitution, money he didn't have because the FBI had seized everything. Jessica avoided prison through her cooperation agreement, but the other consequences were severe. 5 years probation, $400,000 in restitution payments she'd be making for the next decade, permanent ban from working in pharmaceutical sales, healthcare distribution, or any Medicare-related business. Most importantly, she had to publicly testify about her role in the fraud scheme. The trial lasted 6 weeks and was covered extensively by financial media. Jessica's testimony was detailed, humiliating, and ultimately crucial in convicting Trevor and 8 co-conspirators. The personal cost was enormous. Several of Jessica's friends stopped speaking to her after the trial. Her professional reputation was destroyed, not just in pharmaceutical sales, but in the broader business community. When potential employers searched her name online, the first results were fraud conviction reports and trial testimony. She moved back to a small apartment in San Jose, taking a job as an administrative assistant at a medical supply company. The pay was $38,000 a year, about 1/3 of her pharmaceutical sales income. Her new colleagues didn't know about her past, but they would eventually. These things always come out. The psychological impact was harder to measure, but equally significant. Jessica had built her identity around being successful, sophisticated, and superior to people like her simple janitor father. Losing that identity forced her to confront some uncomfortable truths about who she really was. For me, the consequences were more complex. My relationship with Jessica was permanently changed. We had dinner once a month, but the easy familiarity was gone. I was no longer Dad who cleans offices. I was David Miller, tech investor and FBI cooperating witness. The power dynamic had completely reversed. She was polite, respectful, and careful in a way that felt artificial. Gone was the casual dismissiveness, but gone too was any sense of genuine intimacy. We talked about safe topics, weather, current events, her new job, but avoided discussing the trial, her financial situation, or our family history. I wondered sometimes if destroying her criminal behavior had also destroyed our relationship permanently. The professional consequences were more positive. Revealing my true role at Tech Hub had opened new investment opportunities. Startup founders who'd previously ignored the janitor now sought my advice as a respected industry veteran. I joined the boards of 3 companies and accepted speaking engagements at Stanford Business School and UC Berkeley. My story became a popular case study about hidden talent and the dangers of making assumptions about people based on their job titles. But the most significant consequence was industry-wide. The MedFlow case prompted congressional hearings about pharmaceutical fraud detection. New regulations required additional oversight of distributor licensing and stricter penalties for kickback schemes. 3 federal agencies created joint task forces to investigate healthcare fraud. My recordings and documentation methods became a model for other fraud investigations. The FBI now trains financial crimes. Investigators on unconventional intelligence gathering, a nice way of saying, listen to the people no one notices. Sarah Davis won an investigative journalism award for her pharmaceutical fraud reporting. Her follow-up articles exposed similar schemes at 4 other companies, leading to additional prosecutions and policy changes. The tech industry also took notice. Several companies implemented new security protocols after learning that their business conversations weren't as private as they'd assumed. The idea that janitors, security guards, and maintenance staff might be listening and understanding made executives more careful about discussing sensitive information in common areas. Most unexpectedly, I received dozens of letters from people in service jobs who felt inspired by my story. Janitors, food service workers, security guards, and maintenance staff wrote to share their own experiences of being underestimated and overlooked. Many were far more qualified and intelligent than their job titles suggested. Some were retired professionals working modest jobs by choice. Others were immigrants with advanced degrees, working entry-level positions while building new careers. Their stories reminded me that invisible people are everywhere, and most of them have more depth and capability than anyone realizes. The financial consequences were relatively minor for me. Jessica's restitution payments came from her income, not my assets. The legal fees were significant, but manageable. I actually profited from the increased visibility. My investment portfolio grew by $23 million in 6 months as new opportunities emerged. But money had never been the real issue. The real issue was respect, family loyalty, the question of whether someone could love you for who you are instead of what you appear to be. Jessica had failed that test spectacularly. But in failing it, she'd forced both of us to confront some fundamental questions about our relationship. Could a family relationship survive the complete reversal of assumed power dynamics? Could respect be rebuilt after such a profound betrayal? Could trust be restored when it had been destroyed so deliberately? I didn't know the answers yet, but I was determined to find out. 1 year later, Jessica and I met for dinner at a small restaurant in Palo Alto. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place where we could talk without pretense. She looked different, more humble, less polished. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple business casual attire from Target. Her hair was shorter, practical rather than styled. She looked like someone who'd learned to live within her means. "Dad," she said after we'd ordered, "I need to tell you something." I waited. I've been going to therapy, talking about what I did, why I did it, and how I can make sure it never happens again. That's good. My therapist says I have a pattern of using people and then discarding them when they're no longer useful. She says I learned to measure people's worth by their status and income instead of their character. What do you think about that? Jessica looked uncomfortable. I think she's right. I think I treated you terribly for years, not just with the fraud thing, but with the constant dismissiveness and contempt. I used your love for me as a weapon against you. I nodded. It was accurate. I don't know if you can forgive me, she continued. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now who you really are, and I'm ashamed that it took federal prison time to make me pay attention. Jessica, I've already forgiven you, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I know, I understand that our relationship is different now. Different doesn't necessarily mean worse. It just means more honest. We ate in silence for a few minutes, both processing the weight of that honesty. Can I ask you something? Jessica said. Why did you reveal everything that night? You could have stopped the fraud without destroying my career. I considered the question carefully, because you needed to learn that actions have consequences, and because respect isn't inherited, Jessica. It's earned through character, consistency, and how you treat people when you think, no one important is watching. I understand that now. Good, because that's the most important lesson I could teach you. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Jessica, But from now on, love comes with boundaries. As we left the restaurant, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope that my daughter might finally become the person I'd always believed she could be. If you found this story helpful or recognizable, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones who surprise us most.